What's going on, everyone? Glad to be back in the saddle. It's your man Louie T here with another installment of the Louie T Network podcast. Hope this Tuesday evening is treating you well, or whenever you're hearing this. Hope the weekend was fantastic for you. I'm back. I'm refreshed, ready to get after it. Franchise tag window is officially open. So we will discuss some of the most notable names that will be likely sources of discussion when we talk about the franchise tag this free agency period. I think a lot of these guys are going to get the franchise tag, and it's going to water down the free agent market considerably. And so a lot of people get excited when they see some of these names, but I hate to be the bearer of bad news. A lot of these guys won't see the free agent light of day. However, we will discuss some of the most notable names that more likely than not will receive the tag. Also, remember, deadline spur action. We talk about this all the time. Don't expect to hear too many of these guys being franchise tagged right off the bat. However, as we get closer and closer to that deadline, as we near the start of the new league year, you're going to hear a lot of these names either reaching long-term deals with their respective teams or being slapped with the franchise tag. Either way, we'll discuss that and plenty more on the Louie T Network podcast tonight, which starts now. The Louie T Network is powered by MusicHead University. MusicHeads, classes in session. Turn me up. Enroll on YouTube now. Link is in the description. Who else could it be but me, your man, Louie T? Welcome to the 398th installment of the Louie T Network podcast. I, of course, am your set man, Louie T. Thank you for joining me. Hope this podcast finds you in great spirits. Weekend was outstanding. It was exactly what the doctor ordered. Got away for what seemed like not long enough, but it was a quick, trip and a good refresher. Always good to spend time with family. Always good to get away from the kids. And to just take a step back from everything. So got to do that. I wanted to respond to something that we talked about last week on this podcast real quick. We talked about Suicide Squad versus the Suicide Squad. And I didn't realize, I'm not a DC guy, admittedly. So I didn't realize that I was in the minority. Like, everybody that commented was like, bro, it's not even close. The Suicide Squad, which is the second one, way better than the first one. It's not even up for debate. And most people who are DC fans couldn't stand the first one. And the second one is what made up for the first one being as bad as it was. I just didn't see it that way. But I'm not the one you should be talking to because I'm not a DC fan. I didn't read the comic or anything like that. So I really enjoyed both movies. I enjoyed the first one a little bit more than the second. Not by much, but I enjoyed the first one more than the second. And a lot of you pretty much were like, bro, you're crazy. Well, that's cool. And I appreciate everyone that commented and told me, hey, you got to watch Aquaman. We haven't done that. That's next up on the list. Someone also, I think that same person was like, yo, you got to check out Shazam. I thought about Shazam. It looked too goofy initially. Maybe that's something I need to go back and kind of check and see if that's something that we might be interested in. A lot of y'all got a kick out of the Netflix spring cleaning, if you will. I found myself going down that Netflix rabbit hole again last night. I literally was on Netflix for like an hour and 15 minutes. Didn't watch anything. Just went through all the new things that were up there. Went through some of the documentaries, excuse me, and found some that I liked and added those to the list. I went through some crime dramas. I was really in my crime drama documentary bag. So I don't know if you guys watched what was the name of that damn, good gracious. This one blew my mind. I think it was like Lover, Stalker, Killer, or something like that. I won't tell you too much, but it's about this. He's a mechanic. This guy that's a mechanic. He gets a divorce from his wife, and she decides to move to Nebraska, take the kids, move to Nebraska. So he's like, I'm not going to be out of my kid's life. So I picked up and I moved to Nebraska as well. So he started over as a single man, and he started hitting the dating apps. And I'm going to leave it there. Just know that the shit was crazy. It took so many twists and turns that you wouldn't believe. This one blew my mind. I told you guys, I'm a big First 48, Dateline, Secrets Uncovered. You name it, I watch it. Okay. Snapped, right? Like anything you could think of. Fatal Attraction. I watch all of that shit. I've never heard anything like this particular special. You have to watch it. It is the ultimate curveball of all curveballs. Good stuff. Anyway, I digress. So let's get to the gem dropping session, shall we? I think we shall. Let me drop this gem on your melon. Open your mind, let your conscience be free. You're now rolling with your man, Louie T double E. Let me open you up. Get you thinking a little bit. So, franchise tag window officially opened today, February 20th. It goes until, I believe, March the 5th, where teams will have to make a decision as to what they want to do with some of the players, or a player in particular that they deem to be an asset, or a player that they want to keep but can't come to an agreement on a number that makes sense for both sides. So a lot of times you don't want the market to set the price for your free agent, because I've always told you this. There's always somebody out there. There's always somebody out there eyeballing your stuff. I remember as a Commanders fan, I remember once upon a time when we were called the Redskins, we had a wide receiver named Ryan Grant. And we all were like, hey, Ryan can go. And you were thinking, nobody wants Ryan Grant. If we want him back, we can get him back. And sure enough, he hit free agency. And the Baltimore Ravens, was it the Ravens, or I think it was the Ravens initially, scooped him up and gave him good money. And we were floored. We couldn't believe what we were seeing. It was something like 3 years, $20 million. And I was like, whoa, good for Ryan Grant. I don't know what the Ravens were watching and looking at, but good for them. Bless his heart, or bless their hearts. Good for him. I'm happy he's getting bread. Wow. And then I think somebody finally got to them and was like, yo, I think we made a mistake. The stats we were looking at, they don't belong to him. They belong to that guy. You're like, oh, what are we going to do? Say that he didn't pass the physical. Okay, cool. So they said he failed the physical so they could pull the deal. And then he ended up signing like a meager deal with Indianapolis. And then, a couple years after that, he was out of the league, which is what we all expected when he left Washington. He won't last long out there in those streets. he's not that good of a receiver. But it further hammered home the point of somebody's always watching your stuff. No matter how insignificant you think that stuff is, that item is, somebody's always watching your stuff. Anyway, as a Commanders fan, right now with all the money that we sitting on, yeah, we're eyeballing a lot of people's stuff. Problem is, you're not going to be able to get your hands on a lot of this stuff. Let's talk about some of the free agents. So I took the liberty of going through the entire league, all 32 teams, and compiling a list of the best that the NFL has to offer in terms of potential free agents that might receive the franchise tag. So obviously, only one player can get it for each team. I didn't put teams down who I don't think are going to franchise tag anyone. Now, we've seen surprise franchise tags before. Guys that we didn't necessarily see getting the franchise tag initially in the past. So I could omit a player or two off this list, and then we get to the franchise tag deadline, and all of a sudden, two players that essentially have come out of nowhere that we didn't think would be franchise tag have been franchise tagged. I remember a couple of years ago, I don't think I saw Evan Ingram getting franchise tagged by the Jacksonville Jaguars. They ultimately reached a long-term deal with him, but they franchise tagged him first. And I don't think many of us, I know I didn't see it coming. I can't speak for you. I didn't see it coming. That happens every now and again. So let's go through the list. I've got about 14, 15, maybe 16 names on this list. So we'll start with the Baltimore Ravens, who were the best team in the AFC and the best defense in the AFC this season. Obviously, their defensive coordinator, Mike McDonald, is now in Seattle. So we'll see the type of impact that has on that defensive unit. But one thing's for sure, a guy that had a massive impact on how well the Ravens fared this year was Justin Madubuike. And their defensive tackle had 13 sacks last season. And I know we're enamored with sacks and QB pressures, but his all-around game was outstanding. And 13 sacks from the interior of the defensive line, that's almost priceless in the NFL. Penetration up the middle, is the best that you can have in the NFL. Quarterbacks hate pressure from the interior. Madubuike was one of the best in the league at delivering that inside, and thus he's heading for a big payday. Now the question is, are the Ravens going to come up off that bread, or will someone else have to do it? My money's on Baltimore slapping the franchise tag on him and keeping him around at least one more year. See if they can't reach a deal with him. If they can't, he'll play under the tag this year and they'll let him walk next year. And it may not be the worst thing in the world to challenge him to do it again. I've seen a lot of guys go out, ball in that contract year, and then not follow up after, right? The most notable guy for that, the poster child for that, is Albert Hainsworth. So it wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility for the Ravens to say, hey, Justin, do it again. But if you can get a deal done, you can get a deal done. Do it. Speaking of which, let's take a look at the money first before we even go through this list. Now, these are all projections. Okay, none of these are etched in stone at the current moment, but this is what the projected totals will be for the franchise tag this upcoming offseason. Okay, quarterback position, you franchise tag a guy, and obviously we're assuming that this is the first time that this player has been franchise tagged. So this isn't his second year in a row or third, et cetera, et cetera. This is his first time being franchise tagged. These are the numbers for each position projected. $36.3 million for quarterback. So you're right there heading towards 40 million for a quarterback that you have to slap the franchise tag on. Linebacker is the next most expensive position, which is insane because linebacker probably used to be like 5th, 6th, or 7th on this list. But with the deals we've seen from guys like Roquan Smith and others here of late, last year, what was the linebacker for the Bills that went to the Bears? Tremaine Edmonds. Between Tremaine Edmonds and Roquan Smith and, some of these guys that have gotten broken off, even TJ Edwards, much lesser deal, but still really good money for a guy like TJ Edwards. When you see the kind of money some of these linebackers have commanded over the years, it's pushed that linebacker number up significantly to the point where it's higher than defensive end, corner, tackle, etc. These are positions that we all value as more important than linebacker, yet linebacker is second on this list at $22.7 million. Defensive tackle, which is what we just talked about with Justin Madubuike, is roughly $21 million. It's currently at $20.9 million. So you're pretty much talking about $21 million for the franchise tag for a defensive tackle. You would love to get something done with Justin Madubuike so that number isn't that high, right? Now, he may ultimately command that kind of money on a yearly salary, but you would rather get it in a long-term deal than on a one-year deal and have it eat up that much of your cap, if that makes sense. Wide receiver, also $20 million, 20.7 to be exact for the receiver position. So if you're a Commanders fan, a guy like Curtis Samuel wouldn't make a ton of sense. Franchise tagging a guy that was making roughly $13 million to give him a $7 million pay raise when you can get a long-term deal done with him for probably 15 a year, 14, 15, somewhere in that neighborhood. So that wide receiver number, pretty robust if you're not talking about a true bona fide number one wide receiver. That's a lot of money, right? And obviously we know why, and that number is going to continue to go up. Guys like T. Higgins and Mike Evans are slated to hit the market. Will they actually hit the market? Those are names that we'll talk about tonight. And then some. Defensive end. This is a surprising number. I thought it would be a little bit higher. I'm shocked to see defensive tackle surpassing that of defensive end, but that's what has happened over the last few years. $20.2 million for a defensive end franchise tag. So that number is going to get a tremendous boost here shortly with guys like Josh Allen of the Jaguars and Brian Burns of the Carolina Panthers, assuming that they're listed as defensive ends. A lot of times what teams try to do with those players is make them linebackers. Well, doing that doesn't help you anymore, right? Clearly, it's more advantageous for that player to be listed as a defensive end than it is a linebacker, because if you list him as a linebacker, now he's getting more money under the franchise tag. That did not used to be the case, which is why teams used to try and do that. Now players have, bucked off against that. And now they may want to actually be considered linebackers. If you're Micah Parsons, you're like, no, I'm a linebacker right now. Obviously, that number is going to go up, though, the defensive ends, if Burns and Josh Allen and guys like that are labeled as such. That defensive end number should go up here shortly. Offensive line, I've always felt like, tackles should be separated from the interior offensive linemen. But you know what? It probably works out for the best, because if you were to do that, tackles, the number would be extremely high, I would assume. But the guys that aren't tackles wouldn't be benefiting from that number being separate, right? Tackles would love it, but the guards and the centers wouldn't be able to take advantage of what the tackles have set up for them. So when it's all said and done, it probably evens itself out, even though if you were to take the top five, the salary of the top five tackles in the league, that number is probably second on this list behind quarterback. So for the entire offensive line, $19.9 million for the franchise tag. And I'm assuming that that'll hit 20 here shortly and join the rest of the $20+ million franchise tag positions. Corner, that's a surprising one. That's probably the most surprising to me on the list, is that cornerback isn't plus 20 in the $1 million market for a franchise taggee. $18.8 million for a cornerback if you wanted to slap a franchise tag on him. That's very surprising. But what that probably says more so than anything else is that there just hasn't been any elite corners that teams have felt the need to slap the franchise tag on. And I think something else that we're recognizing is that teams are allowing corners to walk. One of the best examples I can give you are the Kansas City Chiefs. They just don't pay corners, which is going to be interesting because they got one that they probably need to hold on to this year. And we'll talk about him a little bit later on, but they don't pay corners. They haven't paid corners. You see Mooney Ward. That's why he's in San Francisco right now, right? They just haven't paid corners. It's not what they do. And there are other teams out there that feel like we'll find a guy. You know, if it comes down to a defensive lineman or an offensive lineman, hell, even a receiver, we'll pay one of those positions over corner. We feel like we can find a guy. And I think that's why you see that market kind of dwindling, so to speak. Anyway, safety, the fact that the cornerback and the safety markets are that close, we're talking about less, shade over $2 million separates them, about let's call it $2.5 million separating them in terms of franchise tag money. That's not as significant as you would think. Without looking at this list, you would have assumed corner would have been like 23, 24, and safety would have been like 16, right where it is, 15, 16. So you're talking about an $7-8 million difference. No, we're literally safety's knocking on the cornerback's door. Like, we're neighbors. $16.2 million for the safety position. And that's seen a spike over the last 3 years or so with guys like Justin Simmons and Minkah Fitzpatrick and guys like that getting to the bag. There was one offseason that I think changed the whole entire safety landscape. I want to say it was like free agency maybe 2 or 3 years ago, where Marcus Williams got a deal from the Ravens. Minkah Fitzpatrick got a deal from the Steelers. Marcus May got a deal from the Saints. I literally just said his name, and Justin Simmons got a deal from Denver, and I think there was one more safety that got a really good deal. I can't think of anybody, but that was the offseason where all the safeties were getting paid. And then I know Juan Thornhill got a pretty nice deal from the Browns last year. So the safety market is really hit an uptick here of late. So that's a good number for the safeties. Tight end, $12 million if you want to franchise tag a tight end, which is why you see a lot of tight ends being franchise tagged these days. I think it was 2 years ago, we saw like 3 or 4 tight ends get franchise tagged. It was Dalton Schultz. It was Mike Gesicki. I think that was the same offseason when it caught me by surprise. that Evan Ingram got franchise tagged by Jacksonville. There are a lot of franchise tags dished out to tight ends because it's affordable. Running back, we talked about this all last season, all off season last year, because the running backs were fed up. Clearly, you see the number 11.3 million. Only punters and place kickers make less on a franchise tag than the running backs. So we know what their gripe is. The $11.3 million doesn't move the needle for them. They feel like they're worth more than that. And that's why you see teams steadily handing out franchise tags to running backs, because it's a very affordable way to get another year of service out of a position that doesn't have a long shelf life to begin with. So if you're able to steal a year for a very, very good player at $11 million without having to sign up long term because you're not sure what they're going to look like 2 years. If you're using them at that rate, you don't know what they're going to look like 2 years from now. That's a pretty affordable way to hold on to a guy. And, you know, obviously the running backs aren't happy about that, but that's why they continue to see the franchise tag being placed on them, that number. Extremely affordable if you're dealing with a Saquon Barkley or a Josh Jacobs or a Tony Pollard, as we saw last year. That's a very affordable number for guys who are, you know, 40% of your offensive output. Could you imagine the 49ers paying Christian McCaffrey $11.3 million for all that he does for that 49ers offense? Yeah, right. So you get why the backs are frustrated, but it is what it is. Kicker and punters, the franchise tag is $5.6 million. Rarely do you see a team use the franchise tag on a specialist, but we have seen it done. And it's really reserved for the rare case where you've got a guy that is just phenomenal. And for whatever reason, you can't reach an agreement with him. You slap the franchise tag on him. It's not a big deal. But normally teams don't find it hard to negotiate with specialists. So anyway, I digress. Let's get back to the conversation at hand. So we talked about Justin Madubuike, and you see the money that he would be getting. We're talking about 20. What was that number? 20, 22? Yeah, 20, 21 almost. 21 almost. So that's a decision the Ravens have to make. I can't see Justin Madubuike being allowed to hit free agent market. I just can't. Carolina, Brian Burns. I don't know if you guys saw. Now, again, remember what season it is. It's Lion season. Believe half of what you see, none of what you hear. Even if it's spat by me, your man, Louie T. So understand that not everything you read has validity to it. However, I do think that there is some truth to this particular article that I saw yesterday that had to do with Brian Burns and the Panthers not being close on a deal right now. His camp is looking for roughly $30 million per year. So just think of it in this terms: 5 years, $150 million. Is Brian Burns worth that to you? Not to me. Sorry, not sorry. Is he ridiculously talented? Absolutely. But I can't see paying a guy 30 a year who hasn't amassed 15 sacks in a season yet. I can't do it. Even if you could have given me one season of 14, I would have been okay. Yeah. But I've seen a lot of guys come through this league get you 12 and a half in a season. I've seen that a lot. You want that kind of money? You need to be posting TJ Watt, Myles Garrett type numbers year in, year out. That's what gets you 30 million a year. I don't think he's had but one double-digit sack season in his first 5 seasons. I think we're in now 4 seasons, 5 seasons. I couldn't fork up that kind of cash. if I'm on the outside looking in, I couldn't do it. If you're Carolina, maybe you do it. That's your guy. It's homegrown product. You'd hate to see it flourish somewhere else. He's super young. He's super talented. You know what kind of work ethic he has. You know what kind of a teammate he is, leader, et cetera, et cetera. Maybe you are comfortable with that number. Clearly they are not, which is why they haven't gotten to a long-term deal yet. But maybe they'll figure something out. I can't see any way that Brian Burns isn't franchise tag. I just can't see it. Chicago Bears cornerback Jalen Johnson, former Utah Ute, is now a free agent this offseason, or will be a free agent this offseason. And at one point he was disgruntled because he wanted a new deal. The Bears weren't really talking new deal with him, and he demanded a trade. Cooler heads have since prevailed. I think he wants to remain in Chicago. I think the Bears would like to keep him in Chicago. He's coming off of his best season of his career. And I'll admit, he's exceeded my expectations. I didn't think he had the foot speed to be an elite corner in this league. I thought it was too often that I saw guys get on top of him. And even in the NFL, I've seen guys get on top of him. He does not have elite top-end speed for a corner. But what he does have is he has great feel. He looks back for the ball. So he has the ability to locate the football in the air. And if you make a mistake, he can pick you off. He had 4 interceptions this year, which is a career high for him. And teams found it tough to complete passes against him. I think teams' completion percentage against him was like in the 40s. So he has established himself as one of the better corners in the league. He wants to be paid as such. I don't know if they'll be able to come to common ground on a number and years that makes sense for both parties. But what the Bears can do is slap the franchise tag on him until they figure it out. And I think that's exactly what they're going to do. They didn't go out and trade for Montez Sweat to then allow Jalen Johnson to walk. So I expect the franchise tag to be used on Jalen Johnson. They had an opportunity to trade him during the trade deadline. They passed that up because I think they want to keep him in Chicago and really build that defense into a beast. And they were showing signs of that at the end of last season. If you saw what they were doing, part of the reason that they retained their head coach, Matt Eberflus, is because that defense really started to show life, major signs of life towards the end of the 2023 campaign. And a big part of why is guys like Jalen Johnson. So I expect him to get the franchise tag. And that number, what we say that number was? 18? 18-7 or something like that, 18-6. That's a great number if you're the Bears for Jalen Johnson, which he's not going to be happy about. He's going to want more than that. And he's going to want a long-term deal. They're going to have to figure it out. But in the meantime, you'll pay 18-6 for Jalen Johnson. T. Higgins, wide receiver of the Cincinnati Bengals. This is an interesting dilemma. We've been talking about T. Higgins now for roughly a year because we kind of saw this coming on the horizon. You can't keep everybody. If you're Cincinnati, you've done a really good job of putting yourself in a position to try to strike while the iron was hot. And it was red hot with Joe Burrow on a rookie deal, with T. Higgins and Jamar Chase all on rookie deals, and you went out and spent all this money on the defensive side, and that's really worked well for you. And Trey Hendrickson and, Chidobe Awuzie when he's healthy, and guys like what is my guy's name from the Steelers? Mike Hilton. It's been money well spent defensively. But eventually you had to play your offensive guys, right? And you've tried to fortify the offensive line, so you've spent some money there, going out and getting Orlando Brown. You also spent on some other offensive linemen. You obviously spent on Joe Burrow, and you've also and I think that contract's going to run out here shortly, but you also spent on Tyler Boyd. So you're at the point now where Jamar Chase's deal is lingering. You're going to re-sign him. Can you really afford to keep everybody? Higgins seems to be the odd man out of this situation. They've said over and over again they want to retain him. They want to keep that young core offensively together. It's tough, man. But the receiver number isn't ridiculous, because if you let T. Higgins hit the market, trust me, someone will pay him $20 million a year. I guarantee somebody's going to pay him that kind of money. So the 20 million, the 20.8 or whatever that number is that we just looked at, that's not a number that should scare Cincinnati away, unless it's just not in your finances right now. It's just not feasible for you. We're going to see. I think, and all signs right now point to T. Higgins being franchise tagged. But I wouldn't be shocked if Cincinnati says, yeah, we can't do it. It's too much money. Money we currently don't have. We just got to let him walk. That's one to keep an eye on right there. T. Higgins in Cincinnati. Tony Pollard in Dallas. I don't see them franchise tagging him again. He did not produce the type of season that they were hoping this year. Could they afford to lose him? They don't have another back on the roster right now that could step in. What is a number that makes sense for both sides so that you don't have to use the franchise tag again? But they used it on him last year. The number doesn't go up significantly if they use it on him again. I think we got to that number. It was like 11.3 or something like that, 11.6. It goes to like 13 million if they use it for a second year in a row. So the number isn't that significant, but do you want to spend $13 million on Tony Pollard after you just spent 11 on him last year? That's the question Dallas has to ask themselves. And they're in salary cap hell right now. They can't afford to be spending $13 million on just Tony Pollard. If they really feel confident about their ability to draft, go get you a new running back. Let Tony Pollard walk and let the market set what his price is. If the number isn't great out there, maybe he comes back to you like a boomerang and you're able to sign him for something a lot less. But that's a decision they've got to make, especially with Dak Prescott's extension looming again, and Dak once again for the second time here in the last 4 years or so has the Cowboys by the scrotum. So I think Tony Pollard probably is a casualty there, and they have to find themselves a new running back. Unless they think the kid from South Carolina who played well last season, Rico Dowdle, is the answer. I don't think anybody thinks Rico Dowdle is the answer. And so he's a nice backup running back. I don't think anybody views him as a lead dog. So we'll see what the Cowboys decide to do. Houston Texans got, I think, one of the better one-year deals that we saw signed last year in Dalton Schultz. I was interested when he wasn't re-signed in Dallas and they slapped the franchise tag on him, and then he was a free agent. I was interested in Dalton Schultz last year. I was interested in Mike Gesicki last year. All the guys that had gotten a franchise tag the year prior had down years or just wasn't re-signed where they were. All of them took 1 year, very affordable deals. I was very interested, especially with Eric Bieniemy coming on board with a tight end friendly offense that he was bringing to Washington. I wanted one of these guys. And boy, Dalton Schultz did not disappoint in Houston. He was C.J. Stroud's best friend. And I think the Texans are going to acknowledge that. And I think they're going to make sure that Schultz remains in Houston, even if it's via the franchise tag. As we just talked about, it's not very expensive for the tight end position. And so I could see them slapping the franchise tag on Dalton Schultz. And this will be the second time Schultz has received the franchise tag in 3 years. So we'll see if they can reach a long-term deal. I don't think he wants to go this route again. He just did this. It didn't turn out favorable for him. If he's smart, he'll find a way to get a long-term deal. Even if that long-term deal is slightly less per year than the franchise tag. If they said, hey, 3 years, 36 million, it's slightly above or slightly less. I think franchise tag is like 12.8 or something like that. What we say the franchise tag was for the tight end position. 12 million, just a shade over 12 million. So if you were to say 3 years, 36 million, that's what the franchise tag is, 12 million a year. I'd take that deal if I were Dalton Schultz. I'd take that deal. But we'll see what happens. I think that's one to watch in Houston. Indy, we're sticking in that division. Colts have a decision to make on wide receiver Michael Pittman Jr. The Colts are void of true difference makers at any of the skill positions other than Jonathan Taylor at the running back position. You can't afford to let Michael Pittman Jr. just walk away. Yes, the $20 million is a pretty hefty price tag, but you got it. You got money. You're not hurting for, bread. You don't have a lot of stars on that team. You're not paying anybody crazy money other than DeForest Buckner. You can afford to pay Michael Pittman Jr. And you should pay Michael Pittman Jr. because you don't have any other weapons on offense other than Jonathan Taylor, as I just mentioned, that scare anyone. You take Michael Pittman Jr. off that team, and you could argue if he's a legit number one. I think most people will say, yeah, he's a one. He's a back end of the NFL one. That's fine. You got nothing that even comes remotely close to resembling a one if you move him off of that roster. So I don't even think this is a choice for the Colts. You got to slap the franchise tag on Michael Pittman Jr. What we say that number was 20 million, roughly 20 million. You got to slap the franchise tag on Michael Pittman Jr. I don't think that's an option. I don't think that's optional. Josh Allen, this is the guy that I was looking at out of the corner of my eye. I was trying to act like I wasn't looking so maybe Jacksonville wouldn't be alarmed. But I was over there like, but they know. They know all eyeballs are over there staring at their stuff. They know. They're no dummies. There's no way Josh Allen gets out of Jacksonville. There's no way. I stopped looking at this point because I already know what's going to happen. 17 and a half sacks last year. That's the kind of dude that can demand $30 million a year, right? Man put up 17 and a half last year. So you best believe the Jaguars are going to make sure that he's back in Jacksonville next year and probably for the foreseeable future. Their means to make sure that nobody else gets involved is to slap the franchise tag on them. They'll make that happen. And I just don't see any way Josh Allen hits free agency. So what a shame. He would have been a nice, and I would have been willing, if Washington would have forked over the cash for a guy like that, young, in the prime of his career. I think he's about to turn 25. Like, that's the kind of guy you would pay $30 million a year to. Right? That's the kind of guy that you'd look to break off substantially and wouldn't feel bad about it. But proven commodity going into the prime of his career, yeah, sign me up for that. But the Jags are like, yeah, I know you would sign up for that, which is why we're going to franchise tag him. So we can sign up for more of Josh Allen. Kansas City Chiefs. The Kansas City Chiefs. The two-time Super Bowl defending Kansas City Chiefs. We put some respect on their name. Have a cornerback here that was among the best in the NFL. He was an all-pro along with his running mate in the slot last year. Trent McDuffie. L'Jarius Sneed is a free agent. And I remember when they drafted him out of La Tech, and he was this raw, measurables type of player. I think they got him in like the 3rd round, could run like the wind, tall, long guy. But, still had some things that they had to figure out. He was a little rough around the edges. Not anymore. This guy is it at the cornerback position for them. And they don't sign corners, though. They don't spend big money on corners. So the question becomes, will L'Jarius Sneed be the guy that they finally open up the wallet for? Because this has been a position that they've always felt like we can find another dude. And maybe they'll tell themselves, we got Jalen Watson right now waiting in the wings to become the new Mooney Ward, the new L'Jarius Sneed. We got another dude in waiting in Jalen Watson. Maybe that's what they're telling themselves. But Sneed, this is the best Chiefs defense we've seen under Andy Reid. And Sneed was a huge part of the reason why. Massive part of the reason. Obviously, that whole secondary, but those two in particular, Trent McDuffie and L'Jarius Sneed, you couple them with Chris Jones and the emergence of Karlaftis and in those linebackers who can just flat out run. And it's what made this defense so ferocious. You don't re-sign L'Jarius Sneed, there will be a line wrapped around the building for teams trying to get at L'Jarius Sneed. So the Chiefs have a decision to make. Either you pay him or somebody else will pay him. And as we saw, I think that corner money isn't a lot. What would we say that was? 18? And the safety money was 16. So Kansas City be foolish to let him walk, but their cap situation isn't the best right now. And maybe slapping a franchise tag of $18 million on a guy that they think they can replace via the draft or already have some young players on the roster that they like just doesn't make a ton of sense for them right now. We'll see. Miami. Christian Wilkins, defensive tackle, Clemson, former first-round pick, has played extremely well for the Dolphins. There's no way they don't re-sign him. But in the meantime, while you're trying to figure out the numbers that make sense for both sides, they're going to slap the franchise tag on him. There's no way Christian Wilkins gets out of Miami for the Dolphins. Kirk Cousins in Minnesota. Kirk Cousins, you know what? I've said this before on this podcast. I'm pretty sure I have. I'm pretty sure I've said this before. But I'm going to say it again because the amount of respect that I have for Kirk Cousins and the way that he's finessed the NFL, not many guys since they have enacted the pay scale, right? The rookie wage scale. Since that happened, not too many dudes have gotten over on the league. A lot of dudes got over on the league prior to that. Like Sam Bradford, for instance. And he was a huge part of the reason why they instituted that rookie wage scale, because too many dudes were coming into the league who hadn't played a snap and were out gaining and setting the tone for what the money was in a locker room. And a lot of veterans were not happy about it, and rightfully so. Here I am busting my ass. I'm in year 6, and this young rookie, wet behind the ears, breath smelling like Similac, comes in here, and he's made more money in his rookie contract than I have in my 6-year NFL career, and I've been a 2-time All-Pro. Make it make sense. So they cleaned that shit up, but not before a lot of people got in and got over on the NFL. Since then, though, it hasn't been but maybe 2 or 3 dudes that have worked the system. Nobody, maybe other than Darrelle Revis, has worked the system better than Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins has been a savant when it comes to making money in the NFL. There should be a Harvard business study done on what Kirk Cousins has done in the NFL in terms of men. And all of this was done on accident. He stumbled into this wealth because ultimately, had Washington given him a reasonable deal, he would have never gone into that first franchise tag and then a second franchise tag. So that was 2 years of guaranteed money, right? 2 straight years of big time guaranteed money. Then he goes to the Vikings. They give him essentially a fully guaranteed deal. And now he's back at it again. I think last year he signed essentially like a 1-year deal for big money. And now this year he's a free agent. They've got a decision to make. It sucks that he tore his what was it? It was his Achilles, right? I think his was an Achilles. Could have been an ACL, but I think his was an Achilles. It sucks that he ruptured his Achilles because the amount of money he might have been able to command would have been crazy. But even coming off of that injury, do you know what a team like the Raiders would pay for a guy like Kirk Cousins? Do you know what a team like Atlanta would pay for a guy like Kirk Cousins? You know what the Steelers would pay for a guy like Kirk? Are you serious? Do you know how many teams? Do you know what the Denver Broncos would do? Now, they're not in a position to do anything right now. They're trying to get up off of Russ, and they're probably just going to have to release him. They're going to eat a ton of money. They're in no position to go out and get a veteran quarterback, are the Denver Broncos. They probably have to draft a rookie because they can't eat any more salary there. But there are a number of teams who feel like we're a veteran quarterback away from competing at a high level. If the Vikings say no mas to Kirk Cousins, which I don't think they're in a position to do because they didn't listen to me last year when I told them, you should draft Hendon Hooker, Minnesota. You should do it. He doesn't have to play this year, which he would have played because Kirk got hurt, but he doesn't have to play this year, and you can let him learn, and he can be in the system, and then next year when Kirk's no longer under contract, you can just go with Hendon Hooker. They didn't want to listen to me, Louie T. Now look where they are. They have a decision to make. And you know who's smiling all the while? You guessed it. Kirk Cousins. Because somebody, if it ain't Minnesota, somebody's coming up off the bread. Damn, it feels good to be a gangster. Must be nice. Shout out to Kirk Cousins, man. The finesse game is strong. Strong. New England. Safety Kyle Duggar. Now, this one's a little iffy. I don't know if Kyle Duggar deserves a franchise tag. Is he worth $16 million? I don't know. I don't think that's the case. He generated some turnovers last year. They like him a lot, but remember, you got a new regime there now. And look, a lot of the guys that are there were there. You know, they know what he's capable of, but do they love him? I don't know. But that's a name to keep an eye on in New England. Kyle Duggar. I wouldn't be shocked if they pass on him, though. I don't know if he's worth $16 million on a franchise tag. Giants. Saquon Barkley. Been down this road before. All signs point to us not going down that road again, similar to what I said about Dallas with Tony Pollard. But when so much of your football team and your offense revolves around your running back, can you afford to just let him walk and just assume that we're going to get, somebody that can come in and do the things that he's done for us? Especially when you're about to have a young quarterback. That's the prevailing thought, is that they're going to draft a young quarterback of the Giants this year. whether they got to trade up to go get one or just stay at 6 and get one or move back and get one or get one in the second round, whatever. They're going to draft a quarterback this year. And if you decide to start that young quarterback, do you really want to turn around and hand the ball off to Matt Breida? I mean, theoretically speaking, they could draft a running back too. Have a new running back and quarterback. And to me, that's more likely the case than it is they bring back Saquon on another franchise tag. But it's still a possibility. And as I mentioned, it's not that much more money. It's $11 million. He would be a second-time recipient in as many years, which would then force them to pay an additional, I forgot what the actual percentage is that you have to pay on top of, the top 5. But it's only going to amount to another like $2 million. So it'd be like $13 million. The Giants are like, all right, if we got to do it, we'll do it. So we'll see. I just always assumed that. And I thought, and I guess I was wrong, if I were one of these backs, if you were so unhappy with these franchise tags a year ago, don't you think it would have been in your best interest? And I just assumed, because this is what smart business people do, I just assumed that you would have signed because a lot of these one-year deals that these players ultimately reworked and signed with these, it didn't really get them a ton more money. It just gave them like incentives that would have allowed them to make more money should they hit them. It didn't really give them a huge bump in base salary and overall money per se. But I would have thought that the big kicker in those 1 year renegotiated deals would have been, hey, you can't franchise tag me next year. That would have been like the biggest sticking point for me if I'm signing this thing, because the money wasn't the big differentiator for me, at least looking at the deals that those guys signed. Josh Jacobs signed a 1 year deal. Saquon signed a 1 year. The money wasn't significant. I would have made sure the first provision that's in there would have been, y'all can't do this to me again next year. I'm pretty sure that those teams would have said, okay, like, just come to camp, man. We're good. Apparently, that's not what these guys did, because Josh Jacobs could be franchise tagged again in Vegas if they wanted to. I don't think they will. He had a down year this year, and I think they can get him back, and I think he wants to be back. I think Antonio Pierce has given that entire organization and all of its players a new lease on life. He's been a breath of fresh air, and I think guys want to play there now. So I think they can find a way to get something done with Josh Jacobs. But Saquon, not so much. We'll see. Interesting situation there. Seattle Seahawks. So they got 2 guys that could easily end up being franchise tagged. Obviously, they can only pick one. Now, you can transition tag one of these guys if you don't franchise tag him. But Leonard Williams, who they traded for with the Giants during the season, and then Jordan Brooks, former first-round pick, linebacker out of Texas Tech, which we know their new head coach, Mike McDonald, values linebackers. We saw how his defense took off in Baltimore once he got Roquan Smith. If he views Jordan Brooks as that kind of a linebacker or a guy that can be a difference maker, or even, let's just say, he views him as like a Patrick Queen type, like that kind of an impact player, maybe they say we can't let Jordan Brooks walk. Who knows? Now, to me, it's a no-brainer. You traded for Leonard Williams. You gave up a second-round pick for him. There's no way you let him walk away. That's not how this works. So, in my mind, Leonard Williams is the clear-cut favorite to be franchise tagged in Seattle. Now, with that said, if you can get a deal done with him prior to the start of the new league year, Jordan Brooks becomes a guy that you start to eyeball. Now, while Leonard Williams was a great fit for what they did defensively last year, is he a great fit for what Mike McDonald wants to do moving forward? Is the question. A lot of questions, not a lot of answers. My assumption is you trade a second round pick for Leonard Williams, you expect him to be back. I expect them to slap the franchise tag on him. And then in Tampa Bay, Mike Evans. I don't think the Bucs are going to slap the franchise tag on him. I think they're going to allow him to walk. If they wanted to get a deal done with him, I felt like they could have done that prior to the start of the season last year. He gave them an ultimatum and said, if you don't get a deal done by week 1, I'm done talking. And, we'll figure this thing out next offseason. But as far as I'm concerned, the Bucs would love to have him back, I think, but I don't think they want to have him back at the money that he may command. And, what's interesting about Mike Evans is, Mike's getting up there in age now. How old is Mike Evans? Let's look and see. He's got to be in his 30s. At a bare minimum, he's 30, right? That's the baseline. But I'm going to say he's going to be 31 during the season next year. That's my guess. Let's see. Mike Evans is 30 years old, and he turns 31 in August. So before the season starts, he'll be 31 years old. So I hit that right on the head. So who's looking to fork over the type of cash that it's going to cost you for a guy who's already got a Hall of Fame resume, who's done something no other player has done in NFL history, and that's start their career off with 10 consecutive 1,000-yard seasons to start a career? No one else has done that. I don't know if anybody else will do it. Again, that's such a hard feat to accomplish because it forces you to do two things. One, above all else, be healthy, right? Can't get 1,000 yards if you're missing 5-6 games during the course of the year. Mike Evans doesn't miss a lot of games. Two, you got to be consistent no matter who's throwing you the football, which is what he's done, whether it's been Jameis Winston or it's been Ryan Fitzpatrick or it's been Tom Brady or now Baker Mayfield or whomever. They've gone through so many quarterbacks in Tampa. He has always been the guy. Period. End of discussion. He might have even gotten some Josh Freeman. I'm not sure if he was there. That might have predated him, but he might have even got a little bit of Josh Freeman too. So for him to have gone over a G every single year of his career to this point, remarkable feat. But when is that consistency going to stop? He dropped a lot of balls. Pause. Last season. And it's not just last season. He's dropped a lot of balls over the last 2 or 3 years in Tampa. He's still a problem. He's still a big-time playmaker, but he's going to drop the ball. He's going to drop the ball. But there's no denying what he's capable of. And who's going to fork over the cash that it's going to take? Will Tampa just swallow their pride and say, he's a buck? He can't play anywhere else and pay him? That's not how the NFL works. I watched Joe Montana finish his career in Kansas City. I watched Brett Favre finish his career in Minnesota. That's not how the NFL works. I'm watching Aaron Rodgers finish his career as a Jet. Tom Brady finished his career as a Buck. That's not how the NFL works. Emmitt Smith finished his career as an Arizona Cardinal. It's rare that you get happily ever after as a fan. I know a lot of Bucs fans who would love to see him finish his career out in Tampa where he belongs. I know some Bucs fans who are like, good riddance, get rid of him. He can't catch the damn football, which I think is a bit of a stretch. It can be frustrating at times when, it's 3rd and 7 and he's open and he drops it. But how about when it's 3rd and 9 and he catches a 47-yard pass? Like he did in the playoff game against Detroit when the offense was dead and he made 2 big plays, and just like that, you're back in the game. That's Mike Evans for you. So they'll figure it out. Either it's the franchise tag or he's going to be paid by somebody else. He'll be paid by somebody else. Anyway, I digress. Those are all the guys that are notable names that I expect to hit free agency, but not hit free agency. A lot of fans of other teams are eyeballing these players in particular. I don't think you're going to get a chance at a lot of these guys. Now, what's funny is I just listed 15 players, 16 if you count Jordan Brooks, in addition to Leonard Williams. But I think it's Leonard Williams. So I'm going to say 15 guys I just named. We never get 15 teams slapping the franchise tag on a player. And what you also have to take into consideration is what are the team's finances? A franchise tag of $20 million may not be feasible for a team that is already $17 million over the cap right now and still has work to do to get under the cap. So a $20 million, even though you want that guy, $20 million may not be feasible for your cap situation right now. So you got to let him walk. So you also have to factor that into the discussion and the equation. But I'll say out of the 15 guys I just gave you, 7 to 8, so roughly half of these teams are going to slap the franchise tag on these players. Now, which 8? We can't be certain. I can give you 3 or 4 that I am almost 100% certain they're going to slap the franchise tag on that player. You guys know the names too. So we'll see what happens. Anyway, I digress. Let's get to social media maneuvers. I'm a midnight marauder. Y'all know how we do it. So y'all know how this works. If you want to have your voice heard, if you got something you want to say, now's the time. Use the hashtag LouieTLive to have your comment read on the air if it is pertinent. If you want to ensure that your comment is read, super chatting is the way to do so. We'll get to as many comments as we can. I'm not going to try to keep you here too long. We're already an hour in, so I might try to abbreviate how many comments we take so we can get this thing over with, because I don't want to hold you guys hostage. But, sometimes these late night Louie sessions take some incredible turns, and these pods last a little bit longer than I anticipate. So we will see. So let's get to the comment section. And see what you guys have to say. We start with Kimura. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB, who writes, honest reason why I like The Suicide Squad more is because the first movie could have been completely avoided by just destroying the heart. Yeah, it could have, but they had a purpose for the heart, right? They had a purpose that she served, and destroying the heart would have stopped them from being able to utilize her powers. They felt like they could control her by, having the heart. They were wrong, obviously. And they didn't take into consideration that she'd find her brother and he'd get as strong as he ultimately did, and so forth and so forth. I don't think they planned for all of that stuff. But it was I liked it. I liked it. The second one, I think the reason I like the first one, and I think I said this already, but I'll say it quickly again. I thought the characters and the relationship between the characters and the whole narrative and plot of, hey, she's going to kill us if we don't do what she says, it held more weight than the first one. The second one, they were kind of like on board. Like nobody was trying to leave, you know, at least in the first one, somebody got their head blown off so that everybody else knew, like, hey, don't try that shit, man. They didn't have to blow anybody because everybody wanted to do it in the second one. And like I said, I thought the actual superheroes in the first one that they assembled, it was just a better group, better personalities, all of that stuff. I didn't think that was necessarily the case with the second one, but I think if you're talking about the overall movie itself, the plot, all of that, probably the second one was better. I'll give you that. Wilfredo Elias, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB, who writes, will Philly let Swift hit free agency? I want him in DC. Yeah, I don't see them re-signing him. Or at a bare minimum, maybe they do want to re-sign him. I don't know if he wants to be back in Philadelphia. I can't put words in his mouth, but he's from Philly. He grew up an Eagles fan. That's home for him. So I would assume that if things went well for him last year, now, did he get it as much as he would have liked to? No. I'm pretty sure he's disappointed at how things turned out, especially after what he did in weeks 2 through 4 or so. You know, that Vikings game on Thursday night, which was week 2, the following week against Tampa in week 3, and then week 4 against Washington. He wasn't as dynamic, but he still had an impact. Specifically those 2 weeks, weeks 2 and 3, he was leading the NFL in rushing after 3 weeks of football. And then for whatever reason, they just went away from him. I can't explain why, but they did. And I'm pretty sure he was disappointed with his role. Probably felt like he was in Detroit all over again. But if they came at him with a reasonable deal and it was one that he was willing to sign, I could see him being back in Philadelphia. I just think he's going to want a clean break. I think he saw what happened last year and he might say, you know what, I'm good. But he could also have enjoyed himself last year, know that Brian Johnson's no longer there calling the plays. Maybe Brian Johnson didn't have as much to do with it. Maybe he did. I don't know. I think when it's all said and done, he'll be allowed to hit the free agent market. Now, will he go back to Philadelphia is another question altogether. But I don't think they're slapping a franchise tag on him. I'll tell you that. I feel almost 100% certain they're not going to slap the franchise tag on him. I don't think the Eagles value running backs like that. They let Miles Sanders walk last year. I don't think they value the running back position like that. But especially behind that offensive line, they probably feel like they can go get just about anybody. So I can't see them franchise tagging him. And I don't know if he'll be back or not. Reedy Davis, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB, who writes, Lou, I know we wanted Ben Johnson, but do you think this staff can move the needle like Ben Johnson would have? So I think the real question you have to ask yourself is, could Ben Johnson have built a staff like the one we've seen assembled in Washington? We don't know how this staff is going to play out. Will they ultimately be really good? Will they be a lot, less effective than what we envision them being? We don't know. But what we can say is on paper, this is a really good staff he's put together. A good mixture of young, up-and-coming coaches, veteran coaches with, tons of experience and know-how, guys that may be able to fill in. Like, it looks like they're building a staff that will be able to endure a loss here, a loss there, because we got young people behind those guys ready to fill in voids that may be created because of success. Would Ben Johnson have been able to do that? We can't say he wouldn't have been able to do that. I don't think he would have been able to do it at the level that a guy who has already been a head coach, been around the block a couple of times, and Dan Quinn has been able to assemble. Is Cliff Kingsbury jettisoning the Vegas Raiders to come to Washington, to be with Ben Johnson? Obviously, the answer is no, because Johnson would have been calling the plays. But Even if it was Mike McDonald, is he doing that for Mike McDonald? No, I don't think so. Right. So Ben Johnson is definitely a needle mover on offense. I'm not one of those people that's going to sit here and badmouth him because he decided to go back to Detroit. That's his prerogative. I don't like the way he did it, and I've already expressed that, but that doesn't change the fact that the man is excellent as a play caller. You cannot like him. You can dislike how he handled this whole situation. And if the things that people are saying that he said about us are true, then you may be well within your rights to not like him and root against him. Knock yourself out. That's not who I am. What I'll tell you is he's a tremendous play caller offensively. That doesn't make you a great head coach. But we were willing to find out. Will this offense be as good as it would have been under Ben Johnson? I don't know. I can't say. I know I would have loved to have seen what Ben Johnson's offense would have looked like here in Washington, but I'm excited about this staff. I'm more excited about the prospects of this staff having a chance to work here in Washington for the next 4 to 5 years versus Ben Johnson coming by himself and not knowing what he would have brought with him. I'll take my chances with this group, but I would have loved to have seen Ben Johnson in Washington, and I'm not going to waver off of that now that he decided not to come. He's still a great offensive mind, and he's shown the ability to be highly effective in this league. We'll see what he does again in Detroit, but I like what Washington has assembled. King of the Bluegrass, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB. King of the Bluegrass writes, loved the QB breakdown. My favorite time of the year. We're going to get into it, and I talked about it already on a video I put out earlier today. We're going to get into the quarterbacks this week and really, really dive in. If you're a Commanders fan, you only care about the top 3, really. There's some people out there that, are trying to make a case for one of the second tier guys, but you get this high, you're at 2, you can't afford to pass. And the 3 guys that are available make it pretty easy for you to stay at 2 and just take somebody, to be honest with you. It's a good position to be in, if I may say so myself. Really appreciate you, King of the Bluegrass. Vincent Coe, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Vincent Coe, thank you for being a member of the MOBB, who writes, Lou, can you tell me about the Hawks' new coordinators? I don't know who they are, so I can't even tell you who they are. I can look them up. Hold on, give me a second. But I don't even know what you guys have done. I remember we were talking prior to the weekend that you still hadn't really done anything from a staff perspective. Then you started to, make some moves here and there, but I still didn't see who you guys signed. So now I do know about Aiden Durde from Dallas. I do have something to say about him now. I do know about him. I don't know who you got as an offensive coordinator, though. So, yeah, I don't know who Ryan Grubb is. I got nothing for you. He was at the University of Washington the last 2 years as an offensive coordinator. So, I guess you would be able to just look at what the Huskies have done. I haven't watched Michael Penix Jr. on tape yet. He's going to be one of the next guys that I take a look at. So I'd be able to answer that question by Friday. Hopefully we'll be back on the podcast on Friday. But I know I got a couple of things that I do have to get done on Friday. But if we're able to get back on the pod on Friday, I'll be able to tell you about Ryan Grubb. I can tell you about Aiden Durde, though. That he was the defensive line coach in Dallas. I'm pretty sure you heard me talk about him on Hard Knocks. I don't know if you watched Hard Knocks the year the Cowboys were up there about 3 years ago or so now. And Dirty was one of the stars. They followed him around. They were in the defensive line room. Um, the players were making fun of his accent. It was hilarious. But he's a good coach, and you could see. And I talked about him as one of the guys that I wanted Washington to go after if Dan Quinn was allowed to poach more Cowboys assistants. Dirty was one of the guys that I wanted. Clearly, Dallas wasn't having that shit because we weren't bringing him here to be the defensive coordinator like you did. We were going to bring him here to try to be the defensive line coach, and Dallas wasn't having that. So you were able to wrestle him away and give him the defensive coordinator position. This is a guy that played over in Europe and was really solid at the linebacker position. He's since taken a very, I think, positive transition from player to coach on the defensive line, and his energy is infectious. The players really take well to the coaching, and now the question becomes, what is his defensive philosophy? And will it align? I'm assuming it will with Mike Macdonald's. Will McDonald be calling the plays? Will he have Aiden Dirty calling the plays? What's the setup going to be? But I think he's going to do really well with the players out there. And those two together, if they can put their heads together and come up with the defense that kind of fits what they want to do, you should be good on that side of the ball. The question is, offensively, what is Ryan Grubb going to come in and do? Just off the top of the dome, Washington was one of those programs that spread you out, really free-flowing offense, a lot of empty sets, a lot of, they probably played a lot of 10 personnel, if I had to guess. Definitely a ton of 11, So we'll see. We'll see. I'll be able to tell you a lot more about him. Vincent Coe, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Double up. Thank you for doubling up. Who writes, is Malik Neighbors a number one wide receiver in other drafts? Yeah, I would say so. Now, here's the thing about Malik Neighbors, and I'm really going to dig into him as we get deeper into the process. But obviously, watching Jaden Daniels, I've run into Malik Neighbors, and I'm seeing this guy get behind defense, but I'm looking at him and I'm like, what makes you different? Because he doesn't look super fast, but he's behind the defense, so he's got to have speed. He's not big. I mean, if he's over 6 feet, I'd be shocked. Right? He doesn't look like he's not 6'1" or 6'2". I know that. 6 feet is the best he can do. So you're not tall. I don't know how fast you are. Doesn't mean he's not fast. I just don't see blazing speed. Is he physical? Sure, he's a little physical, but not like DK Metcalf or AJ Brown physical at the collegiate level where you go, whoa, like he's tough to bring down like Debo was out of South Carolina. I don't really know what makes him super dynamic until I watch him. So I'm going to have to really is he a technician? I can't tell you. I've seen him win on routes. I've seen him turn guys around, but I haven't seen him getting in and out of breaks. I haven't been watching him enough to say, no, this dude is legit. My guess is he would have been a wide receiver 1 in other drafts. He would have been a round 1 receiver in other drafts. Because what I'm guessing I'm going to find when I watch him is that he checks off all the boxes. That's what I think I'm going to find, but I can't know for sure. I'll say that. King of the Bluegrass, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Double up. Thank you for doubling up. Who writes, do you think Russell Wilson is done as a high-end quarterback? It feels like it. It most certainly does. I really didn't love the fit with him and Sean Payton. I said that when Payton got there. I'm like, this is not a great fit. He is not a quick decision, ball out of his hands type of quarterback, which is what Sean Payton likes, which is what he had in Drew Brees for all those years. Russell Wilson has never been a quick processor, so I didn't think it would be a great fit. And it wasn't. That doesn't mean he can't still play, but I don't think the offenses he's been in the last 2 years have fit his skill set. I'll say that. That being said, he hasn't done himself any favors. He hasn't looked anything like the Russ that we saw in Seattle when he was at his apex. So I don't know if that guy's coming back or not. You generally don't get better as you get older. And as we've said many a times, and we'll say many more, Father Time is undefeated. So we'll see if Russ can ride again somewhere else, but it won't be in Denver this year. But there are teams that could use a veteran like Russell Wilson, and that guy, that Russell Wilson mystique might come back and give some team a chance. But right now, it doesn't seem like it. I still think he's a Hall of Fame quarterback, even if this thing doesn't end the way that you'd like to see it go for him. I still think he's got Hall of Fame credentials, but an ugly finish could put him in a situation where it's not as much of a slam dunk as we would have thought, say, 4 years ago. I'll say that. Red Wing 01. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB, who writes, if the Pats go quarterback this year, I know they'll want Mac Jones gone with all the reported drama in that locker room. I wonder where he'd get shipped. So we've heard his name come up as a potential, asset that could be dealt by the Patriots. And we just assumed it'd be the same thing like the Bears, right? You get a new guy in there. It's awkward with your former first round pick still sitting there. You don't want that awkward energy. You don't want the players in the locker room choosing a side, even though it'd be a lot less toxic in New England because they've already quit on Mac Jones. He's done. Whereas in Chicago, there's still team fields in that locker room. Guys have rallied around him. They see him as a leader. They see him as a guy they can win big with. And so you can't let him stay there and linger with the new guy coming in. Do you have to trade Fields? I don't think you have to trade Mac Jones, but why would you want him there? If you feel like he's a headache or he might, and I told you guys this in his draft. I said he's immature. I told you guys that. He was immature and he had a lot of growing up to do. And we saw that. Whether it was him getting after coaches on the staff during a game, during a timeout. He's handled some things really well. Like when he got benched against the Colts over in England, he handled that well. He handled it well, and he rooted for Bailey Zappi at the end of that game. He knew he didn't play well, and he knew he was the reason they were losing that game. And he wanted Zappi to go in there and play well. And you could see it. But he hasn't always handled things the right way. And I'd be shocked if he was still there. And they're drafting a quarterback. The Patriots are drafting a quarterback at 3. So there's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. It's just, are they getting rid of Mac Jones? And does anybody even want him? Is the question. I've always felt like somewhere like San Francisco would be great for him. Now, they've got Sam Darnold. I don't know how long of a deal they signed Sam to this past offseason. But Mac Jones, I've always said a guy like Mac Jones would be great in a Kyle Shanahan type of system. The only thing that sucks is Mac doesn't have any wheels. So when shit breaks down, he's not going anywhere. But in a timing-based offense where you got play action fake, you're throwing it over the middle, Mac Jones could, I think, thrive in a system like that. We'll see. That's always been a place that, remember, Kyle wanted him back in 2021 and was convinced by the rest of his staff and front office members that they needed to go with Trey Lance, which I still believe was the right decision. I would have told him, Kyle, Trey Lance is made for your offense, bro. We got evidence. We're watching him run a semblance of the offense that your dad has instituted into the NFL for years. You can't get it any easier than this. And I think that's what they said. Like, bro, we have actual proof he can run our system. We're watching him do it. Now, again, the level of competition, the amount of experience that he has, all of those things can be questioned, but can he run our offense? Can't be questioned because we're watching him do it at a very high level. So he's always, I'll say that, I said all that to say this, he's always liked Mac Jones. And I think Mac could work in that offense. So for whatever it's worth. Reedy Davis, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Double up. Thank you for doubling up. I think that's a double up. Might be a triple up. I think that's a double up. Yeah, that's a double up. I was right. Who writes, can we draft a quarterback at 2 and Sam beat him out? Sure, you can. Absolutely, that could happen. It's happened before in the NFL. Generally, it usually doesn't happen with super young quarterbacks like Sam, though. It's usually when you have a veteran, a guy that's been in the league 7, 8 years, and he's a bridge quarterback. You draft the youngin, and your youngin just isn't ready yet. And the veteran is clearly head and shoulders above the youngin. And we've gotten to a point in the NFL now where even if the youngin isn't better than the bridge quarterback, you're just going to throw the youngin out there because the experience is invaluable. As long as he can protect himself, you'll take the L's because you want him to go out there and play, and you're hoping that it's a CJ Stroud situation. Anthony Richardson looked really good before he got hurt, right? They feel really good about starting him. But everybody knew Gardner Minshew gave them the best chance to win. But that's not what it's about. It's about developing because the upside on Richardson is much greater than that of Gardner Minshew. So generally, you just start the youngin. But once upon a time, guys got drafted early and didn't play. Now, I'm going back a ways, but Carson Palmer was the number 1 overall pick in the draft, and he sat for a whole year behind John Kitna, right? If we bring it to more current times, situations where the young rookie didn't start right away, but ultimately started relatively quickly in his NFL career. Patrick Mahomes clearly didn't start his rookie season, sat behind Alex Smith. Justin Fields did not start right out of the gate. Andy Dalton did. That didn't last very long. I think maybe 2-3 weeks in, and then Fields got, maybe 5 weeks or whatever. Deshaun Watson didn't start his first game in his NFL career. They went in a different direction, and then he ended up starting like week 2 or 3. And there's a lot of these examples. Trey Lance was drafted. Obviously, Jimmy Garoppolo was the better option, so they went with Jimmy Garoppolo, right? You see it all the time. But the league is moving towards, hey, if your dude is able-bodied and you feel really good about him and he's shown the ability to set protections and get, protect himself and be able to run the offense, you just put him out there. Sam is interesting because it would be more like Drew Brees and Phillip Rivers if you were to go with quarterback at 2, which is the assumption right now, because Drew Brees was still young. when they drafted. Breeze was in the 01 draft, and then they drafted Rivers in 04. So you're talking 3 years removed from spending a second round pick on Drew Brees. And he had 1 year left on his deal. And you were drafting his heir apparent. And then Breeze goes out and plays out of his mind, but then he hurts his shoulder, so it made the decision even easier. They weren't going to bring him back. They were always going to go to Phillip Rivers, no matter what he did to his shoulder. But that's one of those rare instances where you still have a guy on a rookie contract that beats out the young, but that's a long time ago. Like, that's just not happening anymore. And Breeze was a second round pick. Sam Howell is a 5th round pick. And even though I hate that discussion, I hate that argument, I think that's trash. It's low hanging fruit. It's an easy excuse to not play him or to say he's bad. He's a 5th round pick. People are going to lean on that. People are going to continue to beat that horse. It's long been dead. It is what it is. But could if Sam were in the same offense that he were in a year ago, I think it would be likely that he would perform at a much higher level than a rookie that's being brought in. But being that Sam is going to learn this offense pretty much, I won't say at the same rate, but he'll be learning the offense at the same time. I don't know if there's a clear advantage for Sam. And if things are equal, they're just going to start the young quarterback. If there's not a sizable gap, they're just going to start the young fella. So yes. Yes, there's a scenario in which Sam could beat out the number 1, the number 2 overall pick and start week 1, but it's highly unlikely. Highly unlikely. Red Wing 01. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Red Wing 01. Double up. I think it's a double up. Pretty sure it's a double up, and it is. Who writes, interesting point you make. Do you think there would be something similar here with Sam and who we draft, or no? Is that a point in May's favor since they're already friends? So that's been, an angle that people like myself and others have brought up, how that could be awkward. I'm pretty sure they've already talked about it. We just saw them at the North Carolina Duke game, 2.5, 3 weeks ago. Like, they already know he could end up in Washington. So I don't think that's going to be awkward. If they're really friends like they say they are, then while there'll be a competition and they both want to play, they're both going to be cool with whatever happens. And Sam's no dummy. He knows if they draft Drake May at 2, they're not drafting Drake May to hold the clipboard. They're drafting him to play. So it'll be interesting to see the dynamic in that room should they go with Drake May. The bottom line is, under no circumstance does Sam Howell stand a chance to be this team starter moving forward. Because as I've said to anybody that will listen, and this, I had to come to grips with this, and I understand how the business works. When you draft a quarterback in the first round, you are going to give him every opportunity to succeed because you've spent resources to draft that particular player. And we're not just talking about the pick or the money that you've invested. You've spent timeless resources to vet that particular prospect. You've talked to so many people. You've used so many man hours to try to make sure that you're making the best and most informed decision on the most important position in all of sports. So it's not just the money. It's not just the high draft pick. It's also the time and resources invested in making sure we're getting the right guy. There's no way you're not going to play that guy. Even look at Jordan Love. Look at Aaron Rodgers going even further back when he took over for Brett Favre. They were always going to play Aaron Rodgers. Whether Brett Favre decided to retire or not, they were going to push him out the door, and it was easier for Brett to just say, okay, I'm done. He really didn't want to go, though. Clearly, that was evident by him returning after initially retiring and then saying, hey, I want to play again. And they were like, bro, we already gave the keys to Aaron. He was like, well, just go get him. And they were like, no, come on, man. That's not how this works. You know that. And when they drafted Jordan Love, the writing was on the wall for Aaron Rodgers. He knows it better than anybody else because he was Jordan Love in that equation the last time. So he knew, okay, y'all coming to get me. At what point will I look over at the scores table and see Jordan Love taking a knee? For years, I've been, just playing ball, and no matter what kind of mistake I made, I never had to worry about looking over at the scores table and waiting for somebody to sub in for me. But when they drafted Jordan Love, Aaron Rodgers knew at some point he was going to look over at the scores table, and Jordan Love was going to be taking a knee, ready to check in. And when that horn went off, he was going to point to Aaron Rodgers. Like, yeah, I got you, bro. So if you draft a guy at 2, he's going to play, period. Whether that's this year, next year, 3 years from now, he's playing. So even if Sam Howell, let's say something happened and Sam Howell had to play this year and he killed it. 37 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, 4,700 yards, all of that good stuff. Guess what? They're still going back to the number 2 overall pick when he's healthy. Now, Sam Howell has more value in a trade, way more than he did a year prior, but that's not going to stop them from exploring Drake May or Jaden Daniels or whomever they drafted at number 2 overall. So we'll see what happens, but Sam Howell isn't starting in Washington. That's over with. That ship sailed. And we talked about it last year. I said, Sam, you got 1 year to prove to everybody. That's it. It sucks. You got 1 year to prove to everybody that you belong. Clearly that didn't happen. King of the Bluegrass. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. King of the Bluegrass writes, I think Sam can beat out Drake, but not Daniels. Daniels has too many exciting tangibles. I don't think he's beating out either one of them. Period. End of discussion. But it's funny that you say that. He can beat out his former teammate, but he can't beat out Jaden Daniels. I don't think we'll ever, really know, because you're not getting a real quarterback competition, I don't think. They may tell us, yeah, we're going to, let these guys battle it out, because that's what Dan Quinn said when he got here, which is, we're going to have true competition, yada, yada, yada. That's cool. But when you spend the number 2 overall pick on a guy, you didn't spend that pick for him to stand on the sidelines next to you. You made that selection for him to play. So I can't envision a real competition taking place. Navy Ramjet, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB. I wanted to say that email you sent me was hilarious. And I still haven't responded to the last email, but I'm going to respond to both of them. But I just want you to know that I saw it. It was hilarious, and I got a good chuckle out of it. Navy Ramjet writes, Lou, good evening, good sir. Likewise, good evening. Hoping the wife and kids are doing well. They are. Appreciate you for asking. And likewise, hopefully you and the fam are doing well. Also, help me. I'm drinking the Kool-Aid. Am I a fool? Who cares? Let's effing go. HTTR, HTTC. This is the time of the year where copious amounts of Kool-Aid is drank. And people get drunk. This is the time of the year that it's supposed to happen. And if we were to have a strong free agency and an even stronger draft, what do you think is going to happen then with the fan base? It only gets louder, right? So we'll see what happens the rest of the offseason. There's nothing wrong with being excited. There's nothing wrong with buying in. Just understand that there should be expectations put in place. That's it. That's all I've ever advocated for. But I can't tell anybody how to feel. I can't tell you to not expect 12 wins. I'm telling you that realistically, that's probably not going to happen, but it's up to you to decide what you think this team should or shouldn't do. It's not for me to decide. I just know that I'm practicing patience and perseverance because there are going to be things that upset me, things that don't go the way that I would like them to go. And I'm going to have to be patient and I'm going to have to overcome some of that adversity. It's not going to be smooth sailing. You know, as much as we would love it to look like the Texans or the Lions last year, that's not what it's going to look like more likely than not. And I'm mentally prepared. And I tell y'all that all the time because a lot of people say that they're prepared and they're okay. And then you get in the season and they're not okay. And not everybody's built for that. Now, I've seen it firsthand doing what I do. And for as long as I've done it, I've seen it firsthand where people are not okay with losing in the season. They say they're okay and they're ready for the growing pains that come. They're not. They said the same thing about Sam Howell. Oh, I'm ready for the growing. The first sight of trouble, they're ready to jump ship. I see it all the time. See it all the time. A lot of fans are not loyal, and that's fine. I don't have any issues with that. When we're talking about specific players, a lot of fans are not loyal. You see how they try to turn on Terry this year? They've already turned on Jahan. So, yeah. I'll just say this. I'm excited about the first two steps of the offseason. I said that this was a 5-step process this offseason. And step 1 was the GM, front office. Step 2 was the head coach. Step 3 was the staff. All 3 of those steps have gone great. I was going to say flawlessly, but obviously the coaching situation didn't go as originally planned, but it's went better than expected. Now you got to do free agency and you got to do the draft. Those are the next 2 phases, the 2 final phases of the offseason, and then we go to work. That's when I'll let you know how excited I am. I'm excited regardless of what is done in free agency or the draft. I'm excited either way because it's a new beginning. We're starting fresh, blank slate. Let's see what we can get done as a real NFL outfit with real adults in the building, running it like a real operation. You can't beat that. Now the question is, what kind of talent will they be given to try to help turn this thing around sooner rather than later? That's where the GM that we just lauded and praised comes into play. That's where Lance Newmark comes in and tries to help. And then when we finally acquire that talent, whatever it looks like, that's where this staff that we've built up and said that we're so impressed with, that's where they come into play. So we'll see. Nothing wrong with being excited, though. Nothing wrong with being excited. Kevin the PRF, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB. My guy Kev writes, your Daniels breakdown gave me pause. Takes care of the ball, not the strongest arm. Sounds like up against NFL windows, he's tucking and running more. That could be the case, you know. Just because you don't have the strongest arm doesn't mean you can't be effective. But from what we've watched, and you'll have a chance to watch it with your own eyes with the film. What I've watched, at least, I can't say what I've watched is a guy that a lot of times will turn down difficult decisions and passes in favor of trusting what he knows is a tried and true method, which is his legs. Like, I'm not going to turn. You don't go 40 over 4 being a risk taker. It's not. That's. I mean, we've talked about it. You know, we've seen Mahomes go off, but he's also thrown 11, 12 interceptions when he goes off. You'll take those because it's all in the name of being aggressive. Whereas Aaron Rodgers, he's so accurate, but he's also not a risk taker a lot of times. It's a reason Aaron Rodgers, in those MVP years, it was nothing for Rodgers to be 38 over 4 because he'll chuck it out of bounds or he'll take a sack before he tries to do something dangerous. Now, he knows I got a big arm, and if I had to squeeze it in there, I can. But for the most part, you don't go 10-1, 9-1 touchdown to interception ratio without being somewhat cautious. You're going to turn it over if you're going to take some risk, which you have to do in the NFL. Jaden Daniels is going to have to do that, but what he can do to offset the lack of arm talent is he's got to be more timing and rhythm based. He's got to trust what he sees and understand that, hey, if my receiver does what he's supposed to do, this route calls for him to get 12 yards of depth and then come straight down flat, not drift up the field an additional yard or two, but come straight down flat at 12. My job is to throw it into this window. He should be there, and I'm going to cut it loose. That's what the 49ers offense is based off of. Brock Purdy, a lot of times, isn't throwing to a receiver. He goes play action fake. His back foot hits the ground. Those linebackers suck up because McCaffrey's been giving them work. So that second window behind the linebackers is wide open, and he throws to a spot. And Brandon Ayuk or Deebo Samuel is going to just magically appear in that spot. When he cuts it loose, they're not there. But by the time that ball gets there, here comes one of those guys over the middle. Boop, ball right in their hands, run after the catch. Jaden Daniels is going to Brock Purdy doesn't have the biggest arm, but he throws the football within timing and rhythm of the offense. Back foot hits the ground, ball out. Trust what you see, trust what you know, deliver the football. If Daniels can do that, he'll be fine. He'll be fine. All right. Let's go ahead and we'll go to garbage time. And for garbage time, I'll just stick with the comment section because I really don't have anything in particular. And we'll take a few more comments before we get out of here. So let's go back and we'll ride through these comments real quick. I saw a few comments in here. So I'm going to knock some of these out. Derek B. writes, 12 years, 231 million, and one playoff win. I wonder which idiot franchise gets Kirk to 300 million. Somebody's going to do it. Like I said, Kirk has been the king of the finesse, and it's not like he's trash. You know, I'm a Kirk Cousins supporter, but I think I grew a different level of respect for him watching the quarterback documentary, because not only has he finessed teams out of the bread, He's done it with a smile and a Bible. And then he had the audacity, and I shouldn't call it audacity, because when you making the kind of money he's making, he's calling the shots. He's like, yeah, I'm not coming in on my off day like most quarterbacks do in the league. Nah, spending that time with my wife. Sorry. I love it. Kirk Cousins is a G. Somebody's going to get him to 300. Somebody's going to get him there. And you know what? He gets to the right team. He could help them win and win big. I'm actually rooting for that, because so many people just act as if Kirk Cousins is trash, and he's really not. But I'm not going down that road again with y'all. Kevin the PRF says, what do you consider the best case scenario situation for Fields? Atlanta. I've said it from day one. If I'm the Atlanta Falcons, I'm doing everything I don't want any of these other quarterbacks. Give me Justin Fields. Homegrown product, wheels for days. You put him in the backfield with Bijan, and you got Pitts. He showed last year he can get it to the tight end. He showed that last year in Chicago, right? Give him number one and give him a tight end and a dynamic back. And he showed you a little bit of what he can do with DJ Moore. And I always forget their tight end's name from Notre Dame. And that makes it even worse because he's a Notre Dame tight end, but I always forget his name. But I'm telling you right now, you put him in Atlanta, that offense will be one of the most exciting to watch in the NFL. That's the best situation for him, if you ask me, in my opinion. And I've been consistent in saying that. OKG 2000. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Who writes, will Washington mess up and pass on QB? Not a chance. Not a chance. I'm not even entertaining that thought. Not because that's what I want. It's just you don't get these opportunities very often. You're in this position, you're going to take a quarterback because your plan is to never be in this position again, right? I still always harken back to Atlanta, and I talk about this every time this topic comes up. They had a chance to take Justin Fields. They took Kyle Pitts instead. They should have taken Justin Fields, because you can't anticipate that you'll be this high in the draft again. They were at 4. They could have just taken Fields, and now they wouldn't have to worry about trading for Fields right now. Instead, now they do have Pitts. But has Kyle Pitts been worth not having a quarterback for the last 3 years? Pretty sure any Falcons fans would say no. So, but they can right or wrong by going and trading for him. We'll see what happens. But Washington's in a similar position. You can't pass up an opportunity to take a quarterback. So I don't see that happening. Jefferson Montenegro writes, Longmire is a great show to watch. I've heard about that show. I don't know if that show is my speed, though. I'd have to go check out the preview for it again, because I think I've watched it before, but I can't say for sure. It's been such a long time. And I don't know why this is, but series with multiple seasons already established are intimidating to me and my wife. If we don't get in on the ground floor and you're already 3 seasons in, the only show that I think we did that with was Cobra Kai. We got to Cobra Kai late. I think they were already 2 or 3 seasons in by the time we got there, and we just binged it and caught up. But most of the time when we see a series and it's already in season 3 and it's 8 episodes per season, yeah, no, you got me. All right, bro, I'm not catching up. So Longmire, I think, has been out for a while, but I won't shut it down. I won't shut it down. Kevin the PRF writes, you a DC Universe fan? Since now the Suicide Squad 2 director is making the next Superman and overseeing the DC Universe reboot. I wasn't really a DC fan because some of the movies just really left a very bad taste in my mouth. Wonder Woman, Superman. These movies were like 3 hours long and literally 2.5 hours of storyline before you got to any action. It just was painful sitting through some of these movies. And it left me with such a bad taste in my mouth where I was like, yeah, I'm good. So much so that I think I missed out on good movies because of watching some of the bad ones. So I still got work to do. Like, I got to go back. I never watched Joker because I was so scared because of all the other movies. But I've heard that movie is great. So I'm going to go back and watch it. And there's so many that I probably need to, like, my wife was telling me one of the Batmans was really good. But I had PTSD. So maybe things can turn around for me now that I've seen Suicide Squad. Maybe that's going to be my re-entrance back into DC, and maybe I'll give them a fighting chance now. Red Wing 01 says, James Gunn also directed the Guardians of the Galaxy movies. Easily the best in the MCU trilogy, in my opinion. DC tried and failed with the Marvel experiment with Josh Whedon, but I think Gunn can do it. We'll see. Easier said than done. That's for sure. Especially when you're dealing with a lot of nerds like us. You got to be really precise with what it is you're doing because we're not normal consumers, if that makes any sense. RHS Chess writes, is Sam the right backup QB if we draft a rookie quarterback? Both would be very inexperienced. I think we should sign Kyle Allen. He is cheap and low-key good, to be honest. I don't have an answer for that. Because while a veteran, a lot of times, I think it's immeasurable what having a veteran quarterback on the roster can do for a young quarterback. I think about, and I don't know what the relationship was with Jimmy Garoppolo, but I can't help but think that him being there had to help Brock Purdy in some way, shape, or form. Not saying that Jimmy Garoppolo is the best, role model and example, but I'm pretty sure Jimmy was able to kick some game to him. I'm pretty sure Case Keenum did wonders for CJ Stroud this year. I'm pretty sure that Gardner Minshew did some good things for Anthony Richardson, even when he was hurt. I know without a doubt, Andy Dalton had to be a calming influence because it was rough this year. It was rough for Bryce Young. I'm pretty sure Andy Dalton was like, bro, I've been there. You'll be fine. Trust me. So, and yeah, even in Washington, we heard Sam talk about Jacoby's influence on him. So I would love them to bring in a veteran, but are you willing to give up the roster spot that is going to take to keep 3 quarterbacks? Because you're not getting rid of Sam. Unless you trade him, you ship him off, you're not going to just cut him. That doesn't make any sense. So unless you're moving him and you're bringing in a veteran, you're going with 2 quarterbacks more likely than not because nobody wants to have a third quarterback on the roster and eat up especially when you're a rebuilding team like Washington. We can't have 3 quarterbacks on the roster. We need all our roster spots. We'll see what they decide to do. User XJT3 writes, according to reports, Jets are eyeing Howell. If true, do you trade him? It depends. It depends. You don't have to do anything right now. So to me, the value isn't in trading him right now. And, you know, if the Jets decide to go in a different direction and they go out and get some other veteran quarterback or some other young quarterback to kick the tires on, so be it. You're not in a rush, though. You know, you don't have to do anything right now. If the Jets truly are interested in Sam Howell, they'll still be interested in him in April. You wait until you see what happens in free agency. You wait until you see what happens in the draft before you move Sam Howell. I always tell the youth of America, you don't quit your job until you have another job already in hand. You have an actual start date. You don't put in your 2 weeks notice, or you don't leave a job or quit a job before you actually have a start date when you show up for the first day at work. Really, you would like to have it where there's no dead period without money coming in. It's a seamless transition from the last check you got from this job to the first check you get from the new job. But you're not always able to sync it up that way. But that's the goal. It's to keep money coming in. You can't get rid of Sam Howell if you don't have – Jacoby Brissett's not on the roster anymore. You don't have any – like, don't talk to me about Jake Fromm. Like, he stinks. Okay? We don't have any quarterbacks on the roster. So you can't just get rid of Sam. That doesn't make any sense. So now if you go out in free agency and you sign one of these veterans, then the writing's on the wall for Sam. And then you can move Sam. Now you got a guy. But you got to see what happens first. And if the philosophy that we've seen executed in San Francisco happens here, we may keep 3 quarterbacks, and they may draft a young guy, because that's what Kyle constantly did in San Francisco. 6th, 7th round, undrafted. Usually it's a late round guy. They take a flyer on a late round guy that's played a lot of ball in college. That's how they ended up with Brock Purdy. That's how they ended up with Nick Mullins. That's how they ended up with CJ Beathard. That's what they do. Maybe that's what we're going to be doing. You know, we'll see. Again, I'm not sure how. That's why all of this is new to us. We don't know what the philosophical approach is going to be. That's why this offseason is going to be fascinating. You may not be able to gather all the intel this offseason, but you'll be able to gather some as to what the preference is going to be here. Is it going to be a lot like San Francisco, or is he going to forge his own path here in Washington? And is it going to be different? Anyway, I digress. That's going to do it for me, your man Louie T, here on the 398th installment of the Louie T Network podcast. I look forward to chopping it up with you guys next time. The goal is to be back on Friday, but I told a story to you guys. I didn't know, because it's been kind of janky, but so that game that my son had, the flag football game, wasn't his championship. It was a playoff game. So the championship is this week. It's Friday evening. So Friday evening may be a little janky, but my goal is to try to get on like Friday afternoon. So we'll see. Hopefully I'll be able to jump back on Friday with you guys. I was planning on doing a throwback, a flashback Friday pod. Haven't done that in a while. We're on the 3rd Friday of the month, so it fits the timeline why not? But again, time has to permit, everything has to line up. But that's the goal as of right now. Real quick, couple of sidebars before we get out of here. If you're an NBA fan or a Grizzlies fan, I don't think there are too many Grizzlies fans out there, but I will be on Bleacher Report tomorrow afternoon at 2 p.m. live, talking about the second half of the season and what to look for from the Memphis Grizzlies. So if you're interested, you're not doing anything, you just want to support, show up, kick it with the kid for about 30 minutes or so. If not, I'll catch you, if you're a member of the mob, tomorrow night rather. We'll be diving into this film, checking out these prospects at the quarterback position. And then Thursday, we're going to line them up and rank them, among other things. So you guys already know what it is. Hopefully I'll be able to see you guys tomorrow, Thursday, and hopefully Friday as well. If not, I'll catch you on the flip side. Y'all know what it is. I'm your man, Louie T, signing off. Until next time, you guys take care. God bless. Good night.
LouieTeeNetwork.